UCLouvain.
Thank you indeed, and it's a pleasure to be here amongst so many distinguished guests and speakers. I have to start in the usual boring way, which is to say that these are my personal opinions and don't necessarily reflect the opinion of the European Commission and should not be quoted externally. I'm just checking if there are any journalists, but I don't see them.
Does that mean it cannot be taped?
It can be taped, but it shouldn't be disseminated under open source. Okay, well, I actually need to get my presentation up. Yeah. So I'm indeed going to delve into how we've looked at this concept of choice in a couple of decisions on which I've worked. Professor Jenny referred to them as notorious cases, Microsoft and Intel. I'm not sure we share that description inside DG Competition, but for some people perhaps they are notorious. But let me give you just a basic outline of the framework. I think, as you all know, the aim of competition policy in the EU and across most regimes is the protection of consumer welfare. And we've most recently, in our 102 guidance paper, which is a policy paper on our enforcement priorities in the area of dominance, which outlines very well the policy aims, and it has three criteria through which consumers benefit: prices, quality, and then finally it describes about a wider choice. And I think that second element is important, of new improved products and services, goods and services. And I think this feeds into some of the elements that Professor Lander was talking about. By the way, Paul, I'm not very happy that you put me after Professor Lander because he's an impossible act to follow. So I'm going to describe, and let me go straight to it, on how consumer choice has been analysed in these two cases. We haven't got too much time to go into detail into the legal framework, so I'll just describe how the cases looked in terms of the broad concept. So here in Microsoft, the issue was that Microsoft had dominance on the PC operating system market with a share of 90+% entrenched over many years. Barriers to entry through the applications that are written to that platform, a self-perpetuating barrier to entry. Of course, dominance itself is not an issue. But the problem and the abuse was that you had this adjacent complementary market for workgroup server operating systems. We're talking about the software on PCs and on servers. And these were servers that dealt with your basic office network tasks of file and print sharing and security network management. And your PC needs to be able to talk to these servers, to interoperate with the server, to be able to deliver these functionalities to your PC. So it needs to have this interoperability information to be able to connect and to talk. Now, Microsoft's own server product, Microsoft entered at a certain point in the 90s. Microsoft obviously disclosed to itself the full interoperability information so that its servers were able to talk to its monopoly PCs. And of course, that information is indispensable because you need to be able to talk to the PC, the monopoly product, to be able to enter the server market. And the issue was that rival server products, Novell, there, when asked a question to communicate by the PC on the Microsoft monopoly operating system, because they didn't have the interface information, they couldn't answer the request, and so that was something that essentially fatally undermined their competitive position, not on the merits of the product, but through this artificial interoperability advantage of Microsoft. And so, again, that's a subject of a whole nother presentation, the legal criteria for proving an abuse in a refusal to supply case, which are very high, and if you have questions, we can talk about that. But the remedy there, after we jumped through all those hoops, and which the court confirmed, was that Microsoft needed to disclose all this interoperability information so that not only its servers could talk and interoperate with the PCs, but that rival servers of Novell, Sun, and the penguin is Linux, that's the Linux symbol, could interoperate with the Microsoft PCs. Now, to give a bit more concrete analysis of what this meant, as I've hinted, it was the artificial interoperability advantage that gave Microsoft servers the advantage over non-Microsoft servers. And what we found in an extensive market investigation survey analysis in the decision, that if you looked at the core functionality criteria of these other server products, they were actually rated as better than Microsoft's products on a number of these core parameters, so reliability, security, and speed in particular. So, in a nutshell, the effect of Microsoft's conduct was to deny a choice, because you had to essentially, you had no choice but to go for the Microsoft product because you needed to interoperate. You were denied a choice of products which otherwise were considered more innovative and which would have brought benefits to consumers. And we articulated this in the decision. I won't read the quote out, but there's a clear reference. I mean, this is back in 2004 already about choice. There are other references in the decision, and it's grounded there with reference to 82B, 102B of the treaty. And it was also confirmed by the court itself in its judgment of 2007. And again, referring to the findings that consumer choice was limited. And again, it's important, and it's a theme, I think, of my presentation, and it will come out, I think, in the Intel part as well, that it's a choice, but of something concrete, of something innovative that's prevented from coming to the market, if you like, as a result of the conduct. And here the court confirms that these other products, which are otherwise regarded as better performing, are prevented from coming to the market and limit choice in a harmful way. Okay, that's Microsoft. So now Intel. Now the product here is CPUs, chips, central processing units for computers, and you essentially have only two players worldwide, Intel and AMD. And they don't sell these products direct to consumers, they sell these products to PC makers, so Dell, HP, which are known in the jargon as OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. Here are some of the main ones, and what happened in this case was that AMD in the early 2000s came up with some good new innovative products. This was recognised by the market, by the OEMs themselves. We have lots of contemporaneous evidence about the OEMs recognising AMD's improvements and how they wanted to give increasing consideration to AMD in their products. We have evidence from Intel itself about how AMD improved its products. And so Intel wanted to counter this threat from AMD. Intel had a market share of 80% in the market, so it was the dominant player, high barriers to entry, two players in the market. It's a high capital-intensive industry, so it's an industry that cannot support that many players. And so, because it doesn't sell direct to consumers, its chips, because they're incorporated in the intermediary, the OEMs, the conduct was vis-à-vis the OEMs, and it was the primarily conditional rebates, also what we called naked restrictions. And in that case, what Intel did to prevent AMD's products getting through to to consumers, was conditional rebates to these main OEMs, to these PC makers, meaning that they were able to get a rebate from Intel for all of their supplies, and they needed to take, given that Intel was a must-have for most of them initially, a certain portion from Intel already. But that rebate was conditional on that customer, the OEM, taking all or almost all of its supplies from Intel. And again, I haven't got time to go because it's the subject of a very lengthy different presentation, because we did a sophisticated, well, firstly, traditional legal analysis supplemented by a rigorous effects-based analysis, which in particular used one of the methods outlined in the guidance paper about analysing what an as-efficient competitor, a hypothetical as-efficient competitor, would have to do to compensate for the loss of that rebate. Again, if you want to talk about that, we can afterwards. But the effect was that AMD was foreclosed from the market. It couldn't bring its products because the rebates in practice prevented AMD from being able to offer, from being able to compensate an OEM which wanted more AMD products for the loss of the rebate that would occur if the condition of exclusivity or quasi-exclusivity for the Intel rebate was breached, because then the whole rebate would be lost. And so what happened as a result of that, by the way, a small detail, most of the conduct was with regards to the OEMs, but there was a new set of conduct, which, if you like, which was the MSH, that's the MediaMarkt group. So it doesn't actually make PCs, it just sells them, it's a retailer. And Intel paid MediaMarkt, which is, I think, the first case that I'm aware of like this, it paid someone 2 levels down the chain who is not a direct customer of it, that it couldn't sell any computers incorporating AMD chips in exchange for a payment. So the effect was, and as I say, there's a great detailed analysis of this, was that AMD was foreclosed. And then if I get to my next slide and we go through the story, the effect of the conduct, and here again we tie in with how the consumer choice consideration was relevant. You have Intel in the early 2000s recognizing the growing threat of AMD and acting to try and counteract that. It sees a growing demand from PC makers and retailers for more AMD products. It targets them through this conduct that I've described. And as a result, these manufacturers and retailers were prevented from bringing to the market, at least in the degree that the market would otherwise come to, and that I think relates to something that Professor Lander said about the optimal choice as decided by the market. Products, innovative products, and again, this is something again that was a theme in the Microsoft part of the presentation, that consumers wanted and otherwise would have had. Now here, we haven't got a court judgment yet. This is from the decision. We'll have that in due course. We have 1 week's worth of hearings in a month in Luxembourg to defend the decision. But in the decision, indeed, again, choice, there are many references, as Paul said, but we talk about the direct and negative impact on customer choice that Intel's conduct had. So it was, again, and also in line with our guidance paper, a key consideration in the decision. Again, I won't read that out, but it's just another example outlining how the effect of the conduct was to prevent products which consumers wanted, they wanted that choice, and which were innovative, from coming to the market. And so I think, again, hopefully that encapsulates in both sides of the presentation, the Microsoft part and the Intel part, that choice is important, but what does it mean in practice? It's not just a slogan, and I think hopefully I've been able to show that it's a key element of our analysis, but that we need to dig in to the story, the effects of the conduct, and the way that we've applied it in these decisions is to act where choice has been harmed, but in the sense where there's real harm deriving from innovative products which consumers wanted from being able to come to the market. And I'll stop there. Thank you.